I was very excited to be on the Hill. I was very excited to work for Joe Biden. He's someone I looked up to.
So you're on Capitol Hill. You're how old at this point?
I'm 28, 29.
And you make some friends, including a woman who I'm just going to call Karen for the purposes of this interview, who's working in Ted Kennedy's office.
Correct.
Okay, and Karen becomes pretty relevant in a short amount of time. Then at some point in your 8-month stint working for Biden, you claim you were sexually harassed, and I'm making a distinction here between harassment and assault. We'll get to the alleged assault in a minute. You claim sexual harassment began. How so?
I would see him in hallways or whatever. He would always just greet me, put his hands on me, or put his hands on my shoulder and rub, my neck sometimes. It was just a bit odd. And I'd never had an employer do that.
Did you ever see him behave inappropriately with someone other than you?
Not really. He would sometimes put his hands on people that I thought it was just unusual, that he would just move people instead of saying, "Excuse me." I would see that once in a while. But he seemed to, at meetings, he would like put his hand, not necessarily look at me, but he would just put his hand on my shoulder, and then I would feel his finger underneath my hair, like on my neck. And
stroking your neck?
Yeah, just a little with his finger, and it just would make me freeze up. They were having a discussion about having me serve drinks at a fundraising event, and an aide was arguing that to me, saying that, I didn't have to do that. That wasn't my job, that because the senator had said he liked my legs and thought I was pretty, I didn't have to do Mary Ann Baker when she talked to me about it. And she just said, if you want to get along here, you need to keep your head down and do what you're told. If you want to keep working here, basically. And she said, you need to button up your blouses, you need to have longer skirts, and you need to not look so sexy and noticeable, and you need to, change how you're dressed.
So what do you think that was about?
I think looking back on it, it was almost like damage control. It's like they were coming out aggressively at me because of the drinks thing, I think, but I don't know.
What was your mom's name?
Jeanette.
So Jeanette says, you got to do something about this. Did you?
No, I didn't. She said, you need to at least document it. And I said, Mom, this isn't the kind of place you do that. And I also talked to my friend, Karen. So
you told her what was happening in the office?
In real time, yes. We were discussing it. This was during that time where I was kind of frozen out. So I was kind of surprised. But Mary Ann came rushing in with this bag, like a duffel bag or gym bag, she called it, and said, hurry, the senator's already on his way. Just follow him and try to catch him before the Capitol and give him this. He wants his bag. I remember going down the Russell Building floors, and so I don't know if I was in the first floor or the basement, and then he greeted me. He remembered my name, and then I said, here you go, Senator. I handed him the bag, and it happened very quickly. I remember being pushed up against the wall, and thinking the first thought I had was, where's the bag? Which is an absurd thought, but that's what I thought, was where's the bag? Yeah, because I was handing it to him. And he had his hands underneath my clothes. And it happened all at once. So he had one hand underneath my shirt, and the other hand, I had a skirt on, and he went down my skirt and then went up. And I remember I was up almost on my tippy toes. And when he went inside the skirt, he was talking to me at the same time, and he was leaning into me, and I pulled this way away from his head, I remember, and so he was kissing my neck area, and he whispered, "Did I want to go somewhere else?" in a low voice. He said some other things. I can't remember everything he said. But he said something vulgar. And
may I ask what?
He said, "I want to fuck you." And he said it low, and I was pushing away. And I remember my knee hurting because our knees, he had opened my legs with his knee, and our knees caps clashed. So I felt like this sharp pain. His fingers were inside of my private area, my vagina, and it wasn't, there was no small talk, there was no it was just sudden, and it was happening like that. And he was saying those things to me, and I was pulling away. And then he pulled back immediately when he could see I wasn't complying. I was obviously just tensed up and frozen, and not kissing him back and not going with him. And he pulled back and he looked at me and he said, "Come on, man, I heard you liked me." In that moment, I knew this was really bad. I knew it was more than just like the assault. It was really bad. He was then angry, right? And I could feel, it wasn't like yelling angry, but like that hostility build. And he pulled back and he was just looking at me directly. And he said, he pointed his finger at me and he said, "You're nothing to me. You're nothing." And I think that's the hardest thing. And I know people talk about the assault, but his words, those words stayed with me my whole life. He took me by the shoulders and he just kind of shook me, almost like, and said, "You're okay, you're all right."
Had you said anything to him?
I wanted to say stop. And I thought it. I don't know if I said it, but sometimes, when I've had a couple bad dreams or a few bad dreams about it, I wake up yelling that. I wake up yelling stop. And then he didn't look at me again. He picked up the gym bag, he turned around and he walked away and he never looked back.
When you say that he went down the skirt and then back up, what is that like? Did he enter the skirt from the top of the skirt?
No, on the outside.
He came into the skirt from the bottom of the skirt.
Right.
And were you wearing underwear?
I was wearing lingerie, underwear.
Right. Okay. Some people are going to hear this story and they're going to say, "You're telling me a U.S. senator in the middle of the day in a Senate office building committed a sexual assault right there?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, how can people believe that?
I don't really care if people believe it or not. I've had to live with it. And then I remember being home. And then I was curled up, like in fetal position, practically, talking to my mom.
Was she the first person you told?
I called her.
You told her all the detail?
Mm-hmm. It took her a while to get it out of me because I was embarrassed about the underwear I was wearing. She described it as sexual assault. I mean, she said, "This is wrong and you need to go to the police." And she was begging me to go to the police. She cried and yelled at me. And then when she was yelling at me, it really stressed me out. But
did you consider it? Did you consider going to the cops?
I did not, because it was the Capitol Police, and I just said, "Mom, you don't do that here."
Did you tell anybody other than your mom?
And I told Karen with it.
Did there come a time when you actually did complain about what had been going on in that office to anyone?
Yes, right before the assault, I had gone to Mary Ann Baker and we had our hallway meetings, and I was about, not serving the drinks, and I started to tell her I was uncomfortable, and she did not want to hear that. Right after the assault, I wanted to tell her about the assault. So we were in the hallway. I was trying to tell her. I was trying to say something happened. And before I could really get any words out, she put her hand up and she said, "I don't want to hear
this." They handed you a clipboard, and it had a piece of paper on there. Mm-hmm. But what did you say?
I filled it out with my information and then said, I described the sexual harassment in terms of that being asked to be served the drinks and being uncomfortable. I doubt I used the word sexual harassment. I did not talk about the sexual assault at all.
One of the witnesses who has come forward to support your story is Karen. Mm-hmm. This person you met in Ted Kennedy's office. Right. There's another woman who says you told her this story about 2 years after it happened.
Yes.
Her name is Linda Lacoste. She's a lifelong Democrat. She says she's a Biden supporter and is going to vote for Joe Biden this November.
Yeah.
But she said this happened. And I know it did because I remember talking about it. People need to believe Tara. Yeah. Let's talk about some of the backlash you got when you came out in April of 2019, including being accused of being a Russian agent. Your comments on Vladimir Putin are a little out there, right? So I want to give you the chance to explain what that's about. You've said he's a genius with athletic prowess that's intoxicating. He has an alluring combination of strength with gentleness. His sensuous image projects his love for life, the embodiment of grace while facing adversity. And that, like most women across the world, you like President Putin a lot, shirt on or off.
Well, that was a joke, but that was humorous, meant to be humorous. But
you sound pretty enamored with him.
But I think that what I want to say about that is, if you read all of the posts, there are a lot about Russia and the anti-Russia sentiment right now that we have. And I don't like xenophobia, And I was writing a Russian novel that was part of the writing group that I mentioned earlier. And we were doing creative writing, creative posts. And I was in the middle of studying about Russia, kind of immersing myself in that. The truth of the matter is, I've never been to Russia. I don't know what it's like to live there or the human rights violations that, he is accused of. And what I would say now is that I don't appreciate his views about, for instance, domestic violence programs. Like, there's not a lot of support for women, from my understanding.
You've had to change your heart on him.
Yeah. But all of that aside has nothing to do with what happened in 1993 or where Joe Biden had his hands where they weren't supposed to be.
Eventually, you do decide to tell the full story, and you put that decision someplace in the summer of 2019. Mm-hmm. You tried to go to the press. You didn't get any. Nobody would take the story. How many publications would you say you went to?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I went to quite a few.
Would they just blow you off?
There was just no answer. Yeah, like I went to, I think The Guardian, probably there was, I reached out to NPR, to The New Yorker. I mainly stayed with like PBS, NPR, New York Times, those kinds of, yeah.
Why do you think they were blowing you off?
I don't know if they were blowing me off, but I think people need to understand when they're trying to tell a story, it's not that easy. I think, you go to the tip lines or if you're not a known citizen or a known person, you don't necessarily get a platform to come forward.
Was this at all politically motivated? Because that's what people think, They think you were a Marianne Williamson supporter, you're a Bernie supporter. Mm-hmm. This is about politics.
No, actually, it's not. I think everything's political. Like, maybe I'll take that back. Everything's political, right? But this is deeper than that. This is about watching the person that assaulted me be elevated to the highest office in the land. He's running on a platform of character, and I found that gross. I know what he was like. I experienced what he was like. And I wanted people to know.
Some of those who touted the "we must believe all women" line the most during, for example, the Kavanaugh hearings for the Supreme Court certainly seem to have changed their tune when it comes to you. Nancy Pelosi's one of them, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York, Alyssa Milano. Mm-hmm. How did that feel?
It makes me upset. It makes me angry because those were people that I respected, some of which I voted for or worked with, in some capacity. And, when I was on the Hill, like in a remote way, they were there. I voted for some people that said this. For instance, I supported Elizabeth Warren, who basically said she believed Joe Biden and just dismissed me.
Are you in favor of the conversation? I mean, does Joe Biden get due process? Does he get the chance to vet these claims and defend himself? Is that okay?
I think he's been doing that, right? He's had a chance for more platforms than I have.
If he's watching this, what do you want to say to him?
I want to say, you and I were there, Joe Biden. Please step forward and be held accountable. And if you feel that you can address this in a real way, then and I know that you should step down. You should not be running on character for the President of the United States.
You want him to withdraw?
I wish he would, but he won't, but I wish he would. That's how I feel emotionally.
If I can just go back for 1 second to Blasey Ford.
Yes.
Because we mentioned her and we were talking about believe all women. Some of those who supported her but now have found a reason not to support you say, well, she was under oath. Mm-hmm. Would you go under oath?
Absolutely.
They say, well, she subjected herself to cross-examination. Would you do that?
Absolutely.
They also point out that she took a polygraph controlled by someone on her team. Is that something you want to do?
I'm not a criminal. Joe Biden should take the polygraph. What I would say is that they're not admissible into court, 1. 2, Blasey Ford took one. Is that true? I believe that's what I understand. But what kind of precedent does that set for survivors of violence? Does that mean we're presumed guilty and we all have to take polygraphs? So I'm just putting it out there. Mm-hmm. So I will take one if Joe Biden takes one.